June 2011, I visited Benghazi as a Spanish foreign minister. At that time, there was a civil war, and Benghazi became the National Transitional Council's headquarters. During this extreme situation, I met extraordinary women fighting for their rights and their freedom. Their fight was not only against the regime, but also against customs and common law rights of their society in a traditional cultural context. The women I met were extremely sophisticated, cosmopolitan, and with a very high level of education. They expressed their difficulties in making their voice heard for the sake of a more open and inclusive society in a new Libya after the war. And then they asked me what I have done to become foreign minister in a country with a Mediterranean culture. And my answer was very simple. You cannot wait to be offered a political role, a political place in your organization or in your life. Yes, you must take it. This is a lesson I learned from a very well-known Spanish politician, Felipe González, former prime minister of my country. And now, yes, let me start by thanking you, Susan, and all your team for inviting me to be part of this interesting and important event. It is an honor for me to have this opportunity to share with you all my personal experience in politics and how these experiences have influenced my life as a woman as well as a citizen. I started in politics when I was very young, and I have been involved in politics all my life. In fact, at least for me, politics is something that we can both feel and experience in all aspects of our life. I decided to be in politics because I wanted to be part of the destiny of my country, Spain. It could sound a little bit solemn, but it's true. I wanted to help build democracy in my country. And if you were to ask me if I have achieved my goal, I will say yes, absolutely. It all started when I was at the university. I still remember those days at the beginning of the 80s when the Socialist Party won the general election in Spain. Everything needed looking at the welfare state, education, public health, pensions, divorce. At the end of the day, we were talking about rights and freedom. It is not just a question of numbers. We are talking about the actual place we have in society. How many presidents, prime minister, party leader, company presidents are women? In 2010, only 7 out of 150 heads of state in the world were women, and only 11 out of 192 heads of government. Among national parliament, ratio of women to men does not reflect the population they are supposed to represent. In 2013, women held only 80% of the 430 seats in the US House of Representatives, and only 20% of these seats in the US Senate. In Europe, the average percentage of national parliament is almost 23%. The numbers are only slightly better in Australia and Canada, where women hold about 20% of the seats in national parliament. These statistics are surprising given the fact that in all of these countries, sex discrimination in most area of life has been prohibited for decades. And what about gender imbalance in our workplace? In the US and most Western countries, the percentage of women on corporate boards on a senior executive team is around 50% or even less. Women you say, Susan, women earn far less than men, despite the fact that they now comprise 40% of the workforce in the US and the same European countries. All around the world, most men and women work in sex-segregated occupations and workplaces. In Europe, over 60% of working women are employed in female-dominated occupations, such as teaching, nursing, and childcare, while 60% of working men are employed in male-dominated occupations. It also happens in our educational institutions. Among full professors at all higher education institutions, women hold only 24% of the position in the US, while in most European universities, the percentage of women faculty is in the range of only 15 to 20%. These are only a few examples of the situation when we talk about the significant achievement that we have made in all the things we still have to do. And do not forget that we are talking of a privileged environment. What about those women that do not have freedom to wear what they want or to choose their husband or even have the freedom to drive a car? What about those women that have been sold into slavery by their families? And what about those that do not have the basic necessity for themselves or their children, or those who have to leave their country to avoid conflict, or simply in search of a better life? Those of us in democratic, pluralistic societies see ourselves as a progressive, given that the living condition of women in our societies are far better compared to the living condition of women in those nations we were talking about. Women in our societies go to school, study, and become highly literate, have careers, drive cars, decide who to marry and divorce, juggle work and family life, and are able to vote and own property. But such evidence of gender equality belies an enormous imbalance in all our political, economic, and educational institutions, given the figures that I have just outlined. Nowadays, the situation is much better than in the past, but it's not enough. So what if women are so far behind in holding government and corporate leadership positions? What does it matter that women work in only a few professions? Do women's role in the labor force actually made a difference to the prosperity of a nation? These are the kind of questions that we should ponder at this moment. Most of us agree it is simply not fair to treat men and women worse than the opposite sex. And that convention generates the necessary political support for adopting legislation requiring equal treatment for men and women in the 1960s and 1970s. It's also the main reason why most people today would feel offended if they were to be accused of sex discrimination. But despite this feeling, many businesses and political leaders still argue that the responsibility for addressing gender imbalances only go as far as that which the law dictates. In response to the reluctance on businesses and government to engage more proactively with the process of achieving gender balance, a number of scholars, such as Lynn Roseberry and Johan Rose, and consultants have constructed an economic theory indicating that bringing more women into leadership positions, ensuring gender balanced teams, and resolving conflicts between parental and work obligations are all good for business and the economy. In the US, for example, we know that the movement for gender equality in 1960s and 1970s had a direct positive impact on the American economy. In that era, laws prohibiting sex discrimination encouraged millions of young women to get college education and aspire to a broad range of careers other than that of a nurse, teacher, secretary, flight attendant, with all due respect to those professions. The resulting surge of educated women who joined the workforce had a significant positive effect on US growth. A McKinsey report states that between 19 and 2009, women went from holding 37% of all jobs to nearly 48%. Without those women, the US economy will be 25% smaller today. In 2011, the average national rate of workforce participation for American women aged 25 to 54 was about 17%, but the top 10 states had participation rate at 84%. McKinsey estimates that just getting all states up to an 84% participation rate will add 5.1 million women to the workforce, which will be equivalent to a growth in GDP of 3 to 4%. Amazing figures. And there are some examples in McKinsey research showing that gender equality within individual businesses has positive effect on productivity. In fact, another recent report, in this case, another Swiss report, showed that in terms of financial performance, the best performing companies had women in top management positions. And all of these statistics are important to keep in mind when considering the future of humanity, prosperity, and security. So why do we need to convince anyone about gender balance? Most of the reasons we heard are variations of the following assertions. Business need workers' commitment to full-time and uninterrupted careers in order to succeed. There are real neurobiological and genetic difference between the sexes that explain occupational segregation and gender imbalance in leadership. Women don't really want to be leaders. Gender balance is for women. Men are not and do not need to be interested or engaged in working for gender balance. Gender balance is a feminist political issue that has no place in the workplace. The people that usually make these assertions are well-educated professionals who generally believe that it's wrong to discriminate on the basis of sex. The problem is that these assertions are based in nothing more than untested assumptions or on wrong personal experience. Because despite all the neurobiological and genetic difference we hear about all the time between the sexes, men are more different from each other than they are from women or vice versa. In fact, it's not a good idea to rely on your own experience of boys, girls, men, and women to make decisions about men and women. It is a real risk to rely on stereotypes. I'm pretty sure that girls want to achieve their dreams and earn recognition just as much as boys. But they don't really grow up in an appropriate environment of role models and encouragement. We have to recognize that we owe much of our prosperity to feminism, but nowadays we need to look beyond its tendency to focus on women and include men. Here, in this place, we need some more men. And what they also gain for gender balance. And one more consideration, I'm finishing. The law is not enough to deliver gender balance. We need cultural change, and that will take a little more time. But there are many things to do, and we are in the best position to improve the situation of many women in the world. Most of us have power in one way or another. We can facilitate the incorporation of women into companies, and we can even elect a woman in a presidential election. We can contribute to cultural change in our families as well in our workplaces. Everything is important. Susan, this event today is important and can be one step closer to what we are trying to achieve. Equality, no more, no less. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We apologize for our technical difficulty at the beginning. I think we overwhelmed the building. So I think I understand you'll take a few questions.
Yes, if you want.
The one thing that you didn't touch on, which you kind of touched on, at least in this country, 70% of the purchasing decisions in a household are actually also made by women. So to think that you can have a board of directors, for example, of a consumer company that does not have at least gender equality when in fact their target market is women is just really crazy. It's not a good economic decision for the company.
That's true.
So it's kind of interesting. So who's going to ask a question? Yes, please just stand up, identify yourself. We have a microphone coming.
Hi, good morning. My name is Isabel Sepulveda. I'm with the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. I thought the point that you made on increasing men in this conversation is very important. What recommendation would you have for approaching these subjects with the men in our lives on a personal level and having them understand it on the same level and the same importance that we do?
Well, thank you very much for your question. I think it's very important to include men in that real challenge that we have ahead. I think we have to improve our level of networking. What I see in my company, for example, men usually do networking all the time. All the time means all the time. They don't need to go at home to deal with the domestic issues or with children or whatever. Well, some of them are really engaged with the family, but most of them are not. So we have to do more networking in our companies. This is first way to improve our level in the companies. Because usually what men do, well, if they have to choose one person as a member of the board or in leading position, they prefer to choose the one that they know better. That's a very simple question and very clear question. But if we try to do more networking with them, we are more exposed and more able to be also in this same position. The other thing is to explain, to make some cultural change. I think everything is related to cultural change inside our company, as well in our family, as well in the rest of society. That we can be the best of everyone. We can be the best and we can do whatever we want. I wanted also to remember what I said in the beginning of my presentation. When I was with the Libyan women, trying to explain them that the way to be in a leading role is just to do whatever you want. If you want to achieve a dream, you have to take this dream, and you have to do it. Do it, do it, do it. You are no less, no more, but do it whatever you want and whatever you have in mind.
Time for another question back there.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm Pauline Rotetta from BlackRock. Yesterday, we saw a report come out that in private law firms, women make 44% less than men. And I know this is something that Susan mentioned earlier in her introductory remarks. What is, in your opinion, what needs to happen in order to plug that gap? It seems as though, the reasons quoted were that men bring in higher paying cases, or at least they're better at getting the credit for them. So what do you think needs to happen in the corporate environment for this culture to change? And what needs to happen for women to stop accepting this as the norm? Thank you.
Well, it's a very interesting question. In corporate and companies, in private sector, it's very difficult to know exactly how well paid is one person or another, because you never know exactly if your colleagues is paying better than you. That's in the public administration is easier, because I told you that in politics the discrimination is less than in the private sector. But in my view, nowadays the situation has improved a little bit. And the situation is much better nowadays, because you have a more equal and balanced inputs in order to offer a different position in the different places of the companies. So I think the only way is to ask for transparency in the companies, to ask for equal treatment, a balanced treatment. If I am an engineer in a company, I'm doing the same job than my comrade, you have to be paid as well as they are. So this is the only way to do that.
I know that my team has told me, my bosses, that there are no more questions, but I want to ask you one last question, because you've had the enormous privilege of being with heads of states, being with ministers all over the world, and now being a senior executive at a company. What do you believe is the overall awareness of governments around the world and for the need for policy change, for policy encouragement, both in terms of the public and the private sector? Because I think for real change, this is got to be part of it.
It depends on the person that you talk about. For example, the most modern aware people are very conscious about, and very aware about the situation, and they really want to change the situation. I am thinking, my own experience in Spain with former President Zapatero. He was leading the most advanced law in all over the world. So he was really aware of the situation of women trying to reduce the gender gap. And we did a lot. A lot means a lot. But we did a lot of change in legislation, but it's not enough. But in my view, the situation is much better, and there are more and more people very, very commitment with the situation of women, leading the situation with the women reducing gender balance. But still, I told you, people and women that cannot drive their own car, for example, in Saudi Arabia, and people that are, the situation is not the same. But even in the most privileged world where we are living nowadays, the situation have to improve a lot. But it's in our hands. We have so many things to do, but don't forget that inside our family we have to do many things to change the cultural roles that we have, in which we have grown in the last few decades.
So with that, I would like to thank you for being with us today, for your passionate presentation. It was fabulous. I think we all really learned a lot and felt really inspired by your background, your words, and how you feel about this very important issue. But most importantly, I think that we admire the leadership role that you're taking in terms of change. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.